Wait, he's dead! What the hell? Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to talk about Havoc Rover, which is a surprisingly broken character. The Rover, or the main character of this game, unlocks a second path once you progress far enough in the main story. You get to use them as a Havoc character, and they are surprisingly incredibly strong. I found this out while co-oping with my good friends at Jeff77, who kind of carried me just by one-shotting everything we were doing, so I decided to take a closer look at this character and found out how broken they truly are. And so in today's video, we're going to talk about why they're so good, how to build them, how to play them, and then go over some showcases of me using the Havoc Rover in different teams, also talking about what teams you can use and how to get a lot of value with this character. Keep in mind, it's still early in the Wuthering Waves game progression, so a lot of the damage you're seeing could be optimized by a lot just by, you know, leveling higher, investing more. But even early game, even with my relatively low level of investment, despite playing a lot, my Rover still absolutely destroys even content where I'm under leveled. Before we begin, I want you guys to know that I do stream most nights on Twitch, link in the description if you're interested. And with that being said, let's get right into it. All right, so starting things off, what does the Havoc main character or Rover actually do and why are they so broken? Well, before we get into that, if you're wondering how to get them, they're actually freely obtained after you complete the 6th chapter of the main story, where you unlock a new type for your main character. Now, with Havoc Rover, all your abilities and playstyle will change and you become very, very strong. The reason for this is as follows. First of all, the Havoc Rover has an insane amount of burst damage. The Resonance Liberation, also known as Ultimate, just at a baseline has a very high scaling. As you can see, at just level 4, it's almost 1000% skill damage on a 16-second cooldown. This is a really high amount, and on top of that, you also have a pretty powerful skill that you can use pretty often. Additionally, a big and core part of your main character or Rover's damage is their Forte Circuit, also known as their Dark Surge state. This is something that you enter once your Umbra gauge is full, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. You hold your basic attack to cast Devastation, and you will enter this Dark Surge state. When this happens, you will gain wings, start attacking with a scythe, and have both enhanced basic and heavy attacks. These will deal a significant amount more damage, and you will be able to do these until your stance expires, your meter drains, and you go back into your normal mode. It is also worth noting, when you're out of your Dark Surge state, you can gain your Umbra back by using your skill and your intro skill, and also normal attacks, but typically, you're not going to be doing those outside of your enhanced state. Havoc Rover will also gain a 20% Havoc damage bonus inside of their Surge state, which is another bonus that will incentivize you to do big chunks of your damage when you are inside of this buffed state. And so while this may not seem like that much, because your scalings are so high, and also crucially, you don't need to spend that much time on your main character. Like genuinely, you will do your enhanced attacks when your Dark Surge is active, use your skill, use your ult, use your echo, and then swap out, proccing your outro skill as well. This allows you to not need a lot of field time and do a ton of burst damage, on top of having access to one of, if not the strongest active echo in the game, at least as far as offensive ones are concerned. This echo is the Dreamless, which you unlock at the same time that you unlock the Havoc Rover. What the Dreamless echo actually does is deal 6 very strong instances of Havoc damage that also have a really high scaling. Because of this, they are good to use on effectively any Havoc character, not just your main character, but also if you are running someone like Jin or a future Havoc character. Dreamless is an incredibly powerful active that can really just carry you through a lot of early content and also scales really well. Additionally, while it's just good in general, it's also for some reason significantly better with the Havoc Rover because of the second part of its effect that will increase the echo skills damage after Rover Havoc casts their ultimate. Now, there seems to be a bit of a mistranslation on how this is worded, but from my understanding, the damage of Dreamless is increased by 50% for 5 seconds after Rover Havoc casts their ult, which is a big deal given how strong Dreamless is. I'm just playing random background footage of me using this active echo, and it really does chunk enemies' HP bars when you factor in that not only is the damage pretty good, but also the AoE is huge, and crucially, the most important part of why this echo is so good is that you can swap cancel it very, very fast. If you were to go through the whole animation and stay on your active character, you would end up wasting a lot of time just to get this damage. However, you can literally just press your echo button, start the animation, and as soon as your first hit is going off, swap to your next character, and then the Dreamless will keep going, keep doing all of its damage, and you will not lose any time time at all, making it effectively a big chunk of free damage that you're gaining. Again, this damage is great at a baseline, but also gets buffed with your Rover's ult, so you typically want to be using it within 5 seconds of using your Resonance Liberation, typically saving that for the end of your rotation, but more on that a bit later. Because of this, you end up having a free-to-play character that has a huge scaling on their ultimate, while also having access to one of the best active echoes in the game that not only is really strong, but also gets buffed with their ultimate in particular, while also being swap cancelled very easily, and is also an active echo that is always on the Havoc set, meaning that it'll synergize well with Havoc characters, especially the Rover in particular. Also, if you don't know, you can grind Dreamless pretty easily by challenging the weekly boss that you unlock after progressing through the story, and you can challenge it on the lowest difficulty, beating it very fast, and then instantly re-challenging, going again and again and again until you get a good Dreamless. Rover also has a pretty strong skill, as well as buffing their own Havoc damage inside of their Dark Surge state, which will also enhance their basic and heavy attacks, allowing them to spend some time on field if you want to. While it's typically part of your rotation to do these basics inside of your enhanced state, you technically don't need to if you have something better to do with your time, like swapping to another character instead. While we will cover exact rotation stuff later, knowing that you can just swap in and out of this character very fast and do a ton of burst damage, while also being able to get some pretty strong basics on field with them inside of their Dark Surge state as well, is the essentials of what makes this character very strong. Additionally, not only are they free to play, but so is their resonance chain, also known as constellations or eidolons from other games. Right now, I believe you can get the first two, which will increase their skill damage and also give them a skill cooldown reset when they enter their Dark Surge state, meaning that you can use your skill, do a heavy attack to enter Dark Surge, and then use your skill once again. Now, personally, I unlocked these two as rewards for handing in caskets I got through exploring, but I believe that we will be able to get more through quests in the future, with these future resonances actually being really good, notably the fourth one decreasing the Havoc resistance of enemies by 10%, which is huge, and the last one giving Rover 25% crit rate in their Dark Surge state, which is also really big as well. Additionally, Rover has good synergy with other 4-star characters, like notably Dan Jin, who not only is a solid 4-star carry on her own, but also can increase your Havoc damage through her outro skill, which is just a nice added bonus. Another actually free-to-play character you synergize well with that I will also be showcasing in this video is Sanhua, who not only is a pretty solid character on her own, both at generating energy and dealing damage, but also she has an outro skill that increases the basic attack damage of the next character you swap into. And while this isn't as notable as the Havoc damage you'd get from Danjin, it's still great for your enhanced basic attacks, on top of Sanhua just being a pretty solid character overall. And if you get multiple copies of her, eventually you'll be able to also increase your team member's attack from her 6th resonance, which is an added bonus. Something else I wanted to mention is that not only can you use this incredibly powerful Dreamless on your Rover, you can also use it on another character in your team, like notably Danjin or another Havoc carry. This allows you to swap cancel these Dreamlesses between your Havoc characters and just get a ton of free damage because of how strong the Dreamless's active effect is. Now keep in mind that the second Dreamless, to my understanding, does not get buffed by your Havoc Rover's Liberation, but your Rover's Dreamless will, which is still enough to make this really strong. Now, as far as teams are concerned, I believe the Rover synergizes very well with Danjin, another Havoc character who also gives you Havoc damage deepen on their outro skill and can benefit from the Havoc main character's resistance shred if you have their 4th resonance, which isn't available now, but eventually will be for free. But even without that, you can also run 2 Dreamlesses, run it on both characters, a very, very strong echo, on top of being a solid DPS, a solid 4-star DPS option that you can use on field and freely swap out of, using their outro skill to buff your Havoc Rover, who then can do a relatively short rotation, entering their enhanced state, using some enhanced basic attacks, skill, ultimate, and echo, which you can then swap cancel and go into your next character. Your last slot in this team is very flexible. Verena is obviously just the best healer and damage buffer, but you can also use Baiji as a free-to-play healer, or even Jan Shin as a shielder and buffer as well, who I think is really slept on, especially when you factor in their ult damage deepen that they have in their kit that is quite relevant for the Havoc Rover. On a similar note, I believe Sanhua is also a really good support for the Havoc Rover for the reasons I mentioned earlier. She's just a solid sort of quick swap burst support, does pretty decent damage through her skill, ultimate, and also heavy attacks through her forte, while also giving you some basic attack damage deepen through her outro skill. She's also a free-to-play character and one of my personal favorites because she synergizes really well with other characters as well, like Kalcharo and Ling Yang, on top of being good for Rover, so a safe investment for me, which is why I have her leveled and built, and one of the characters that I will showcase alongside Rover in the showcase section coming up shortly. Outside of just that though, I think the Rover synergizes well with Havoc characters in general, obviously being able to run the Dreamless active echo on them as well, being able able to quick swap through 2 Dreamlesses will just help you clear content very fast, genuinely. On top of just being a solid character, you can fit in kind of wherever. Now, while you can build a team around them to be able to fully utilize the Havoc main character's kit and synergies, you can also always just use them in a very quick swap style where you use them primarily for their skill and ultimate, entering your enhanced state first, but not needing to do all of your basic attacks if you have a better attacker to use already in your team. Again, it is nice to be able to use your enhanced basics on Rover, but it's not the main source of your damage, so it's okay if you're not doing all of them. Do note though that you want to enter your enhanced state for the extra Havoc damage bonus you're gaining, and if you're wondering how to do that, if you don't have energy, you can use your skill and swap out, and then when you have your intro skill ready, you can swap back into your Rover using your intro skill, use your skill again, and that should help fill up your meter very quickly. Also, in case you're wondering, be sure to level what you can with the resources you have. Unlocking this inherent skill and even like these Havoc damage bonus sort of bonus stats are very important if you can get them. And as far as your priority goes, leveling your Resonance Liberation is very important as it's a huge chunk of your damage. Additionally, your skill and forte are both very strong, especially if you are basic attacking inside of your Dark Surge state. As far as builds go, it is very straightforward. You really want to be sure to be running the Dreamless active Echo as your main Echo. It is very, very strong for the reasons I mentioned earlier. And then afterwards, there's a lot you can do. Typically, you want to just run the Havoc damage set, provided you are basic or heavy attacking 4 times to get its damage buff, which you will typically be doing, but just make sure you're doing this before you use things like your Resonance Liberation, your ultimate. But if you don't have a good 5-piece, you can very easily mix and match 2 pieces of Havoc damage, attack percent, or even energy regen if you need some to get your ult back more often. Typically, I do recommend just going with a 5-piece, doing a 4-3-3-1-1 in terms of echo costs. And as far as stats are concerned, I typically recommend going for crit rate or crit damage on your 4 cost, whichever one you need more of. Your 3 cost will be Havoc damage bonus, and your 1 cost will just be attack percent. For the substats you're looking for, crit rate and crit damage are great, and so are stats such as attack percent, resonance liberation damage, and also to a slightly lesser extent, skill damage and basic and or heavy attack damage as well, if you are using those inside of your enhanced state. Additionally, energy regen, at least a bit of it can be nice. How much you need will depend on your team though. Some teams generate more than others, and the game's still new, so rotations and energy management will be optimized in the future. You don't need to worry too much about it, but just know that energy regen is a nice stat for comfort and for helping you get your ult back more often, so definitely a good substat to at least have a bit of. This is the Echo build that I'm running, and weapon-wise, there's really so much you can do. Pretty much all of the 4 stars are pretty good because Rover can use so many stats. Generally though, in terms of 4 stars, Command of Conviction is what I recommend. Again, a free-to-play option you can choose, with their best in slot being the 5-star Emerald of Genesis, but all 3 other 4-star swords give you attack percent and are viable, and if you have to use a 3-star like Sword of Night, then it can be okay for the time being, but I would recommend getting at least a 4-star because keep in mind, we do have access to 2 different weapon selectors on top of the battle pass if you choose to get it. Now for my personal Rover build, she's honestly very mediocre, but it's still doing really good damage. It's still really early in the game. I've been trying to min-max her, but it's hard because I'm low on resources, and I also main GN, so there's that. But I got her a maxed out, pretty good Dreamless, and then my other pieces are kind of whatever, like Tambourinus is only plus 15, not great substats. Rostrum also not great substats, like no crit and only level 20. My other 2 pieces are also just level 20, pretty decent, but not that leveled. So again, even just by leveling these echoes, I could be doing a lot more damage, but that's not really the point of this video. And we'll get into the showcase very shortly. You'll see my Rover doing very high damage, honestly. I just am very low on Echo XP, and I feel like if I invest more, I get like from 20 to 25. It's gonna make my progression a lot harder. So I'm gonna show you guys kind of what you can expect with this level of investment. With that in mind, I did change into the 5-star weapon that I recently got, the standard one, which you can choose from the free 5-star selector. And honestly, it's a really good sword. So if you play sword characters a lot, I can recommend it. Something you can get from a selector, but also a 5-star. So keep that in mind. My 4-star free to play sword is on my other sword character that I will be using, either Sanhua or Danjin. My Rover obviously does have, you know, decently leveled abilities. Obviously, these could be even higher, and also has her 2nd resonance unlocked. Both of these helping quite a bit. My ratio is really not that high, like 60 to 92 here. Obviously, because Wuthering Waves, when compared to other games, shows you at 150 crit damage because it shows the damage multiplier and not just like your crit damage. But anyways, you'll see my Rover will be doing a lot of damage. And as I said, a lot of room for optimization. A lot of my echoes could just be better. My gear could be better. We're not fully leveled yet, so keep all that in mind. But even despite that, you'll see that I'll be doing a ton of damage, and my Dreamless will be as well. All right, now to go over some footage of my Rover in the tower, we're starting here with a standard Sanhua team. My Sanhua is very well built, that's why I'm using her, with Verena. pretty standard team, characters that are made to burst. I'm kind of quick swapping, or characters that, you know, use their burst, use their intro outro skill, can kind of quick swap and also buff my Rover, right? Verena and Sanhua both buffer. I'm just kind of cycling through my characters, buffing them all with things like their intro and outro skills, notably Verena, who gives you a sizable buff, on top of Sanhua, who gives me basic attack damage deepen when I swap into Rover. Now, here I'm just kind of using all my bursts to clear enemies, and keep in mind, this isn't the deepest floor in the tower that I've cleared. It also gives you a little bit of buffs, but it's a nice one to showcase Rover because later on it's arrow damage bonus, electro bonus, so other characters seem better in comparison. But as you can see, let me just slow things down because it's going pretty fast. I do clear pretty fast. I do start the floor by setting up, right? I start with my Verena's burst, and then I use the Echo, try to just buff my team, swap out, use my Rover burst. Now, typically, I Rover burst inside of my enhanced state for Havoc damage bonus, but when you start, you don't have that. So I'm just like, okay, let me use everything, burst, skill, use my Dreamless, swap cancel it, go to my Sanhua, use everything, just get things going, right? And with Sanhua in particular, I'm trying to build up my outro skill, my Concerto energy, as fast as possible. That's why I stay on her a bit longer than normal. Boom. I actually got it here, so I used my Echo as soon as my Concerto energy was full, swap canceled it, and the Heron, if you don't know, does buff the next character you swap into. So I use my outro skill buff plus the Echo buff. I stack them up, swap cancel, go to my Havoc MC, and then I just do normal stuff. I skill, hold my heavy attack to enter the state, skill resets, use it again, and then boom, we're fighting the boss. I get my burst here. Before swapping, I'm like, might as well burst, might as well use my Dreamless, swap through my characters, sort of reset the rotation, trying to buff everyone, using all my abilities. It's really not that complicated. I'm just skill, alt, and heavy attack, or use my forte on specific characters if needed, when applicable, trying to swap in and out of characters when I have downtime, but mostly when my Concerto energy is full, to proc intro and outro skills, dealing damage and buffing my team. Here, I buffed characters with Verena, swap to my Sanhua, use their abilities, go to my Rover, and while typically I swap when I have my outro skill, what actually happened here was I just used it recently on my Sanhua before swapping out of her. If I go back, boom, around here, I have full Concerto energy. I'm sure I'm going to swap cancel my Heron and outro skill, boom. Then I buff my Rover's damage, but since all my cooldowns are up, what I end up doing is I'm like, okay, let me use Verena's burst. Let me just kind of take this time to set up again. I notice my Sanhua burst is up. I use it, or ultimate. I'm sorry for saying burst. That's a force of habit. Then I go back into my Rover and I'm like, okay, this enemy's dead. So let's just enter our enhanced state, use our ultimate, use the Echo. And as you can see, very easy clear, pretty good damage with pretty good synergy among the characters. Obviously, if you want someone to spend more field time outside of Rover, you could use another Havoc character that synergizes well with her, notably Danjin, but you don't need to. And I've noticed a lot of people hyping up Danjin and Rover, and while it's definitely a good team, I also want to show that other teams can work, like this one that is a bit more quick swappy and very, very strong. This isn't the perfect showcase by any means, but I'm just trying to show you guys kind of how this works, what I'm doing, using all my abilities and getting really strong burst AoE damage. Keep in mind that because Rover's so strong, I've actually used them in teams where they don't really fit, just as a burst, sub DPS, use my Resonance Liberation, my ultimate, my skill, my Echo, swap out, and don't really need to do much more for them to be pretty strong. I use my Forte as well, obviously, but not spending too much field time on them. And then there's other teams like this one where I do spend a decent amount of time basic attacking and doing pretty solid damage on them as well. Oh, also keep in mind that Sanhua is a character that buffs my basic attacks, not my ultimate, so the number you're seeing, the like flashy clickbait burst number, is not going to be as high as the next clip where I am using Genshin. So keep that in mind. A solid character, a solid support sub DPS, but not as flashy as you will see coming up. In this next clip, I'm using Genshin to actually increase my burst damage with her outro skill, and my Genshin is really not built very well. She's on very minimal investment, like level 40 weapons and not level talents, but her buffs still stand. So as you can see here, I'm just doing sort of normal stuff, basic attacking inside of my Rover, and when I use my burst, it did over 50k, which is like pretty insane for just one single instance of damage, on top of obviously being able to like basic attack more. Like I didn't even spend that much time in my Rover. If I wanted to, I could have basic attacked even longer. I also have Dreamless. That's a big burst of damage outside of my burst, which I'm pretty sure I used here. Yep, I Dreamless right before swap canceling it. Then if my Genshin was built, she could also act as a sub DPS, right? Get her punches in, her skill, her Forte, they all deal decent damage. And if I didn't want a healer, although Verena does buff me, but I don't even need Verena in this team. I could have ran another sub DPS if I wanted to, just kind of doing whatever with my Rover, obviously being the main carry here and being the one that gets buffed tremendously. In case you're wondering, the build of my support characters, my Jan Shin, when I used her, was literally on a level 40 weapon plus 0 artifacts or echoes, sorry. Literally not leveled at all. The only reason I'm using this set is to buff my next character. I'm using her just for buffs and her shield. And obviously, as I said, if you invest into her, actually level these things, she'll be more than just a buffer, also being able to do some damage and just be better overall. But even just as a support, works very well. My Verena also on pretty low investment. Granted, I did start gearing her, but again, my echoes are all not leveled. Like they're all plus 0 except the main echo that's plus 5, which is again really nothing. My only other character that I have really well built in my Rover team is the one that I usually pair her with, which is Sanhua. Now, before you actually look at my Sanhua, a quick disclaimer: her build is decent. It's again not super invested. We're still early game. I'm on a 4-star weapon that I got from the free selector, not like maxed out on copies or even talent levels, but pretty decently invested into, mostly used for her really good energy generation, solid damage, and also basic attack damage deepen, which will buff my Rover. The warning I have to say is that I am not on the correct set. I'm on 2-piece energy regen, and then I just took 2 pieces that I have on my GN just because the substats are pretty good. Obviously, the Glacio damage bonus would be better, or even the 5-piece of the energy regen set to buff the next character I swap into. But again, we're early into the game, so it's not possible to min-max everything. I'm just running her on solid stats, sort of saving my resources. Again, not maxed out, but still being able to do, in my opinion, pretty impressive amounts of damage given the investment level. Lastly, regarding Danjin, I was trying to gear her as best I could to use her alongside my Rover, but farming for Havoc sets and Havoc pieces was just really hard, so she's not that well invested into. Genuinely, some of my pieces are really low level, which is why I didn't really include a Danjin showcase. But in case you're wondering, yes, Danjin and Rover work very well together, and as you can see, just by spamming both of my Dreamlesses, you can trivialize a lot of content on top of both characters synergizing well with each other for the reasons I mentioned earlier. And so yeah, overall, Havoc Rover is the character that I really think is pretty broken, like not just as a free-to-play choice that everyone has, but also just in general on the scheme of things as a burst carry, burst support, someone you can use on field, quick swap in and out of, and genuinely just get a lot of value out of. I think is a really strong and, in my opinion, broken character, on top of the fact that they have access to a really strong echo, one of the strongest echoes in the game. And so I really like them and hope this video was educational. If there's anything I want to add, it will be in a pinned comment. Sorry if my investment level wasn't as high as some other people, just because it's really hard without like turbo whaling to sort of rush to level everything, and there's no rush really. I just want to make a good video, and I'm also obviously a GN main, so I'm trying to min-max him as best as I can. And the next character I want to build actually outside of GN is Calcharo, so if you guys want to see that, let me know. Stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to build your Havoc Rover if you're interested in them. Very strong character, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.